All right, welcome to the May 4th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I was having a little computer issue with my monitoring computer, so my Bluetooth mouse decided not to connect and run out of batteries. So I apologize for the late start, but we'll get started in just a minute. I'm going to do a quick audio test and we will begin. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I'm based in the United States, and I am work for Yamaha Corporation of America. And what I will be doing is, if you haven't attended a live stream before, it'll actually just be where you could ask questions in the live chat field, and you could also submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. If when you ask questions, if we could ask a question in the chat field, and sometimes some of my responses may be a bit behind. And as we do that, and as my responses will try to get caught up, but if we could try to avoid asking the same questions multiple times, that would be appreciated as we go to work on different aspects. And if you could ask your questions in a format where we could actually say, I'm running Cubase 11 on Windows, or different aspects like that, what operating system, which version of Cubase that you're using, some of that information is helpful in helping to kind of get stuff configured. If you are watching this for the very first time, we could, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us exactly, where you're from, and also, if you're just watching this live, you can tell us where you're from. If you are if you're actually watching this live, just tell us where you're from. But if you're watching this offline, make sure that you just skip ahead a couple of minutes, and we'll probably be able to get started, and we will go get started. So my Bluetooth mouse has decided to stop working, so I may just try to get some stuff configured here quickly, and we'll see if we could get my mouse to connect. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead, and since we had a little bit of a late start, we will go ahead and start going. All right, so okay, so we had a question that was emailed in of why people would want to use stems for live production. So generally why people would want to use stems is just to simplify the process. So instead of having, let's say, a large number of tracks that would be, like multiple tracks of drums, multiple tracks of guitars or vocals, often, like, if you want to do background vocals, instead of having the computer play back all of these different vocal files, what a stem file would allow you to do is to have like one audio file that would be all the drums, one that could be bass, one that could be guitar, one that could do other types of functions, and that would allow you to simplify so that less things could go wrong. And also, if you're doing it for live performance, people may just want to use one fader. And what I've seen some people also do is just kind of take all of their drums and put these into a group folder. So if you wanted to just do mixing, I could say, now I want to take all the guitars, and I could just come over here and say, okay, these guitars could go into a group. So we could just add a group channel to selected channels. And now when we go to our actual channels here, we could just say, okay, I only want it to see group channels. So this way I can say, here's just my drum volume, here's just my guitar, here's all my vocals. But a lot of times people will make stems so that you have one audio file that will play back where everything is pre-mixed, so that you could at that point, simplify the whole process and take out a lot of variables for live performance sake. Okay. Okay, so I have a question from Ace Amadeus. Hi, Greg. I hope you're doing well. Cubase 10.5. How do I move my Iconica to read from external USB drive, as it takes up a lot of room and I need more space on my physical SSD drive? Thanks. So all you have to do is go to the Steinberg Library Manager. And once we have the Steinberg Library Manager open, we could choose, and we would see this under Hallian. And at this point, we could just see all of the Iconica libraries here. And all you have to do is just click on Move, and then just choose your larger external drive. So as soon as we set up the Move directly from here, that will create the link that Cubase will use to actually be able to access the particular files. So that's all you have to do and that will make the association between Hallian, Groove Agent, your Cubase content libraries, and that will just simply make that association. So when it's moved, that those two will be interlinked. Okay, further question. Where and how do I set the paths so my Cubase 10.5 can read guitar samples, waves, and contact VSTs from external drives? So with contact, I think you're going to have to do it within contact. So a lot of times, for the particular instrument, you may have to just set that up. But once you have your WAV files, for any of your WAV files that come with Cubase, again, just from the library manager, we could choose to move, or you could go into Media Bay and then just have Media Bay go to this computer and choose a different computer hard disk, and just have Media Bay scan that new location, and it should find everything. Okay, so you see Sir Robert is multitasking, going at the grocery store while learning about Cubase. All right, so we have Matt Smith checking in from Chicago. Okay, so Filter Freak's making his 16th session in a row from UK. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Nigel Farley from Plymouth, UK, the first time. So welcome to the live stream. Okay. Okay, so we have Robbie Bowling checking in from Dallas. So Uno checking in from Finland. Okay, we have Anne Marie checking in from Pittsburgh. She's happy that her hockey team's in the playoffs. Congratulations. And Michael Pierce. All right. Okay, so we have a question. How do I use MIDI control inserts, to write MIDI data to a MIDI part like CC7 to 90? I can't get it to write a node to a MIDI part. Is it possible? Important when scoring to film? So really all you have to do is, I'll just do a new project. Okay, so let's say if I have an instrument here. Okay, so let's say we'll just start off with a Hallian Sonic SE. Okay, so now when we come over here, let's go to, let's say, Iconica, and we're going to have the MIDI control insert. So, generally what the MIDI controllers do is, let's say if we have a part, I could just, let's say we'll just come here, look at it. We're going to have no data. And when I go to my MIDI part and let's look at it in the list editor, we'll see it's an empty part. So when I go to my MIDI inserts and we go to the MIDI control, let's say if I wanted to start with MIDI CC7 at a value of 90, so I will come to MIDI control and we're going to say, okay, CC7, and we're going to just put a value of 90 in. So this will actually affect playback, but if I go to MIDI and let's choose to freeze MIDI modifiers. So now when we go to look at this particular part in the list editor, if everything worked right. So I've had this happen sometimes where the MIDI controls won't be written in. But at this point, let's try it just one more time. And I've kind of... And we'll take a look in the list editor again. So, as soon as it plays back, so it's not going to be embedded in the part, but as soon as we have this setting here, this will be, played back at 90. What a lot of people do when just doing a quick orchestral template that you always want to start. If you're dealing with, just your orchestral values here at this point, you could just say, I just wanted to put in an initial value of 90 and store that within your template. So that's what a lot of people do, but it should automatically just play back and send that MIDI CC data. So with a lot of the plugins going to the MIDI freeze MIDI modifiers, we'll embed that data. Let me see if I have an actual note in the file, if that makes a difference. So let's say if I have a note, and let's go to our track and do freeze MIDI modifiers. If that puts it in. So as soon as you have a MIDI note in the part, then that will be written in when you do a MIDI to freeze MIDI modifiers. So at that point, that value that you've written in there will now be embedded within the actual part. So if we go to our list editor, we'll see our control, CC7, and then you could see the value just kind of written in. So as we look at that, we could just see our value of 90 that's been written in. So you could just embed it once there's MIDI data in the part just by going to freeze MIDI modifiers. Okay, so we have Christopher checking in from Columbia, South Carolina. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Jay from Connecticut. Considering Dorico, but there is no notation detail comparison chart to clarify, so I don't know what notation Nuendo is limited to versus Dorico. Please share. So, I could probably spend like an hour or two on that. So some of the main, if I was to just kind of go through a couple of the highlighted features, let's say if I just wanted to open up project here where some notation can make sense. You can do a lot of notation aspects directly inside of Dorico. So if I wanted to, or inside of Cubase, if I wanted to look at my, we'll show you some of the stuff you could do. And if you have particular types of descriptions of projects that you're working on, that could be helpful. But, if you wanted to double click so you could insert all your different clefs, time signatures, expression maps, your dynamic markings, different note symbols, you have pretty comprehensive display quantize function, so you could actually kind of just play different parts in and have that in do a display quantize. So if I just wanted to come right over here. We could also, if you wanted to do, guitar tablature, different polyphonic voicings, lyrics, if you wanted to also, be able to, there's an overlay mode. So as you just kind of hover over, you could adjust different parameters. So if you wanted to adjust like the velocity of individual notes here within kind of your sequencer perspective, and you could view multiple parts here. So, I would say that if I had to give a quick description, I would say if you are wanting to take your MIDI sequence parts and then notate them, that Cubase could probably do that well. I would say that if you're starting from maybe an engraving mode, that maybe, that Dorico, if you're kind of starting off from if your perspective is, I have a blank staff and I compose this way, that Dorico is probably the more appropriate workflow for that. But, you could do a lot of the notation inside of your Nuendo. And then if you needed to do it to Dorico, you could export it as a music XML file or a standard MIDI file to go back and forth between the two applications. But I would, try to explore the notation options that come with Nuendo. So a lot of people, underutilize the functionality. So I think that you can get a lot done with Nuendo if you kind of know what you're doing. But if there's like specific tasks, Jay, that you have, that could be helpful. Okay. Okay, so we see John Costigan. It was great to see you on the live stream. Okay. All right, so we have Detlef from Dusseldorf. All right, and we have Ken from Norway. We have Alexandra from Lisbon. All right, we have Paul the guitarist from Virginia and Lena from Greece. All welcome to the live stream. All right. All right, so just going through different questions here, and occasionally my timeline may jump. Apologize for that. Okay, just going through. All right, we have Taylor from Pine Grove. All right, so we have first-time viewer from Ontario. Welcome. All right, so we have James from Pylon Records in Los Angeles. Okay, so we have a question. I'm running Cubase 11 Pro on Mac OS. I would like you to show the best way to collapse multiple lanes into one. So if we have like a multiple lane recording, so let's say if I come over here, let's activate this project. Okay, so if we have multiple lanes that are visible, and let's say if I was just kind of doing in different editing forms where this was maybe, one take, this was a second take, a third take, 4, 5, 6. So, if you had the lanes open, you could always just collapse them. But if you wanted to do different comping, what you could do is just grab the comp tool and select your different regions like so. And then as we select these, this part that is active and selected will show up at the track level. And to collapse the lanes, all you have to do is show or close the lane view right there. And that should be able to collapse the view. So if that's, if your question's regarding something else, just let me know. So, but that should be all you have to do. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Taylor. In the export dialog, what is the insert IXML chunk and RF64 compliant format? All right, so as we work with the export, this will just be for additional metadata. So when you go to this will allow you to have additional, metadata within the file. So, that could be, like artist information, style, genre, tempo, beats per minute. So those are some of the different metadata. And then we also have the RF64. So that will allow you to have for longer audio files. So if you have files that go beyond 4 gigabytes each, that's kind of what the RF64 handles, so that you can have longer audio files than what the WAV file format will allow you to access. Okay, we have a question from Robbie Bowling. I thought I was putting each song in its own folder. I'm not sure I have. Can I create a new folder, save or move each song to it? Should I name the folder to the corresponding name? So you could name the folder kind of whatever you want. And if you're unsure, if you have a project and you have maybe audio files are scattered between different programs, all you have to do really is come over here and just choose a backup project. And here we could, just define a new folder and give it a new unique folder. And then once we do this, we'll just go here, we'll say Robbie, hit OK. And now once we're here, we could say, we could give it a project name. We could keep the current project, active. We can minimize the audio files. We could remove unused files. You could choose to back up the mixdown folder, and this will now consolidate audio files that are maybe scattered in different audio folders. This will take everything and put it into the newly defined folder that we had. All right, wonderful to see Millard Brown from Pennsylvania. Okay, so we have Paris, France checking in. All right, we see Jeff Sabelsky from Chico, California. All right, we have Kazar from Tehran, Iran. Okay, so we see a question from Nick. Anyone using TouchOC? I'm having a hard time getting it to work with my key command macro assignments. MIDI CC working fine here. Any help appreciated. So maybe if someone else, I don't have TouchOSC, but something that you might be able to do, Nick, is if you have, if it's doing MIDI CC, it's probably transmitting MIDI information. But you may be able to just have, if you don't have the key commands, you might be able to assign. Let's see if we could trigger key commands through the generic remote. So let's say if I just wanted to. So you could trigger like different macros through generic remote, but I think it should be able to function as like a dedicated keyboard controller as well, like a computer keyboard. Okay. All right. We see that Jan from CubaseIndex.com is on the live stream as well. So if you ever want to search for particular topics that may have been covered, okay. So just see, hi, I have a quick question. I see in the status line that my audio inputs in a control room are yellow, and they say not connected. Why is that? I thought it was something wrong with my system. Okay, so let's say if I'm here, I'm not sure where. Okay, so I just see control room not connected. So I think, okay, so I could just see here. So let's say, so once I click, I can now define my inputs. So right now I don't have anything actually connected. So I could just say, okay, now I want my Steinberg URC. Then for that particular function. So now my control room, when I click here and we select a control room, I don't have any connections defined. So we see that this says not connected. Then when I connect my audio interface in the control room, those functions. So it probably means that when you go to your audio connections by hitting F4, that you don't actually see, that you don't have these connections and inputs, or your control room defined and routed to a physical connector on your audio interface. All right. So I just see from Tanmay, Greg, can you tell me what is the Thunderbolt icon in the inspector section I sent you in Messenger? Like, I remember seeing something. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to respond. It was over the weekend, I think. But so, you know, when we say that, you know, I remember something where it seemed like maybe you were setting up a non-MPE controller for MPE. So let's see if I come over here, if we can see the Thunderbolt icon. So let me just add an instrument track, because I may show different icons here. All right, so I'm not seeing the one that's maybe a Thunderbolt icon. Maybe if you could let me know, Tame, which inspector tab it is. All right, so just see from comment from Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, just saying rest in peace to Al Schmidt. So Al is always a wonderful guy. I got to have dinner with him many times. I remember one time when I think I was at an AES show. I'll tell you my little Al Schmidt story. And then it was, you know, it's a big awards dinner, and I was there as part of working on Eric Clapton's Crossroads, which we won the award for. And I was sitting next to Al Schmidt at the table, and we're discussing the inevitable kind of rubber chicken large group dinner kind of thing. And I told Al that the safe bet was always to try to get the vegetarian dish, because they had to make that separately. And Al, not being one that wanted to miss out, actually said, it's like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to avoid the rubber chicken. And unfortunately, this is in New York, I think at the Marriott on Times Square. They had the worst vegetarian dish of all time. So, of course, Al went up as he was giving an award away and told the whole audience that I told him to get to go for the vegetarian dish, and that was the wrong choice, that he would have been much happier with the rubber chicken. So I'm sure the catering staff was happy. All right. All right, so we see Fred from Czech Republic. We have Clay from Los Angeles. All right, and always wonderful to see Gareth. Okay, so we have just a comment from Matt Smith. I'm super grateful for the timestamps that are added to these videos after the stream. Is there an index of all the streams and the questions answered in them anywhere? So go to cubaseindex.com. And Jan, who's going by the name cubaseindex.com in the live stream, he's the one that sets that up. So just make sure that you go to the cubaseindex.com, and you could search for, many questions. I think we're almost at 10,000 questions or so. Okay, so question, is there a way to program compositions in the score editor while hearing each note you enter, similar to the piano roll? Okay, so let's say if I wanted to just come and let's see what sound I have loaded up here. Okay, so let's say I just want to do quick strings. Okay, so let's say. Okay, so let's go ahead into the score editor. Okay, so I'm just going to click on this acoustic feedback, and I want to, let's just put in some quarter notes. So once you have the acoustic feedback icon turned on here, it's my atonal composition. So that's all you had to do. Without that on, you could still enter notes but not hear them if you want to hear the notes as you enter them in the score editor. So, and that's all you had to do. So just make sure that you have this little icon, the acoustic feedback, turned on and enabled, and then you should hear all the notes as they're entered in the notation editor. So question, hey Greg, apart from you, of course, who's the most famous person you've had here in a Hangout? So I think we've had, some, many composers have told me that they kind of watch the Hangouts. So I think, so I know I've seen, like some of the guys from Maroon 5 on the Hangout. Jesse from Maroon 5, he's made the Hangout. I think Alan Silvestri told me that he's kind of been on Hangout. So we have a lot of people that may watch them offline. But there's, lots of kind of famous composer. I know we had David Kahn, who does stuff with Paul McCartney, Clay Ostwald, who's done a lot of stuff with Gloria Estefan. I'm just trying to think of other people. We had Fred Corey on last week. He was drummer in Cinderella and a kind of a known composer as well. So, but they don't always tell me when they're on, but lots of people seem to watch it, and I don't think I'm famous at all. So I'm not going to be in there in that list at all. All right, so we see Mark Rabin's going to have to leave early because he's getting his second vaccination. Congratulations. All right, so we also see Detlef. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It says, yes, I agree. The timestamps for the final video are very helpful. Thanks to everyone how's involved in creating these. So yeah, so basically I take a dinner break after the live stream, and then I kind of watch the whole live stream over again and do the index right after. So I get to do the index twice in one day. All right, my chat field jumped on me. Bear with me just a second. Okay, so we have a question from Mark Rabin. So I use comp lanes when I try to edit those tracks. It places a blank track on top. Diagonal lines that I have to delete, but I can't delete the main track or even edit it. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So let's say if I have my comp here. So sometimes, when we do this for MIDI, so let's say if I come here and I just wanted to add a lane, and I'll copy these different lanes. And now when I come over here, this is maybe, so I'm not sure if it's for audio. So it says I see, so with MIDI parts, you know, we often see these diagonal lines indicating that there is, you know, parts underneath. And I guess if we hover over the audio parts, we can see kind of those same diagonal lines. So that just means, okay, so, you know, maybe, Mark, what you need to do is, you know, as you're here, is you could choose to just open the lanes. And then, you know, if you wanted to delete the different lanes, then you could just do, you know, those diagonal lines will appear. So let's say if I just erase the other parts that aren't being used, and then we close the lanes, that we won't see the diagonal lines here. And there may be another method that you could employ to get rid of the unused parts if you want it, called delete overlaps. So if you go to editing, and then if we just come over here, let's say, I think that was under. So if we select editing, you could just do delete overlaps. And if we enable that, so now as I, you know, move a particular event, let's say if I do a comp here, that those other parts will be deleted. So maybe go to the preferences and try, if you don't want to see those lines and you want to get rid of the other stuff, try maybe enabling delete overlaps. And even if you totally made a mistake with that, you could just kind of come back and undo, and all your parts will still be there. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on the live stream. All right, so we have Paul the Cavern checking in from Italy. All right, and we have Zambia checking in. All right, and we have Ventislav from Sofia, Bulgaria. All right, so Michael Pierce says, is someone going to remind people to smash the like button? Yeah, so if you want to hit the like button, if you learn something new, or if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. All right, so we have Loretta from Vancouver, BC. Okay, so we just see, Greg, what is the meaning of the various parameters in the broadcast wave chunk, and what does it do for you? So a lot of times the most common one is going to be like a timestamp, meaning that like when this file was recorded, you know, so let's say if I record a quick audio file here, so let's say I have this file and I just want to record, you know, the most common metadata would be so we'll come here, let's look at audio 10.0. So we'll go to my pool window, and this will show us all the files are being used in the project. So we come over here, this is the file that we just recorded, and we'll see this little thing called origin time. So this would automatically stamp that particular audio file when in the timeline that file started. Now, if I switch to seconds, and we go to our pool window, we could see this represented in seconds. So we can see that at 20 seconds, 242 milliseconds, this is when the file started recording. And what this metadata would allow you to do, if you're, you know, getting files from someone else and they want you to mix in Cubase because your mixes sound better, all you have to do at that point is just do an edit and you could just say move to origin. So this is a common way of people migrating files back and forth from different programs that have a timestamp. So other things that could, there's lots of other data that could be part of the, the broadcast wave trunk, but that's probably the most common one. Okay. All right. So we see, okay, so it says we have Aaron Barber says, "Hey Greg, I've switched from Ableton to Cubase for the beautiful MIDI editing capability. Can you show how to have Cubase play an external keyboard using a MIDI track?" Okay, so let's come over here. So if you wanted to do that, all you have to do is first, I will just come here. Let's add a MIDI track. All right, so probably your MIDI, your external keyboard, maybe if it's, a contemporary keyboard, it probably has a USB connection on it. If not, it may be connected to like a multi-port MIDI interface. So once we've created a MIDI track, so we do an instrument track. Instrument tracks are only for VST instruments, software instruments. So you need to right-click and choose to add a MIDI track. Once we have the MIDI track set up, you could send this track directly to a physical destination, either the keyboard's USB port or the MIDI interface where that keyboard is connected via like a 5-pin MIDI DIN cable. And once you have that, then the tracks on that particular keyboard will be sent directly out to the to your external instrument, and that's really all you have to do. Now, if you want it, so Cubase will send the MIDI to that particular instrument, but it may not incorporate like the audio from that instrument. So a lot of people would use a mixer to do that. But if we go to one way that we could do this is if you go to the audio connections, we can now go to external instruments. And if your audio interface has like 2 extra inputs, we could say like, I wanted to connect my ModiX and my Yamaha, and what I want to do is to take the analog or digital outputs, whatever can get audio from the instrument into my audio interface, and I could define those inputs for that interface. And now I could right-click and say, I want to add an instrument track, but I wanted this to be a ModiX as an external instrument. So as soon as I come right over here, now when we play MIDI, it's going to be sent out to the MIDI will be sent out to the ModiX, and at the same time, the audio out of the ModiX will be returned into Cubase so that we could do stuff like, run it through the same Cubase EQs and plugins like you do with other VST instruments. Okay, so we have a question from Mark. Can you go into the settings of the audio export feature? The cogwheel allows you to place blocks that auto naming free text confuse me. The pencil icon, syntax, song name, project name, mix one. All right, so when we want to do an export audio mix down, all we have to do is we have different naming conventions. So we'll come over here. Let's say I want to do an export audio mix down. And as we do this, we see this little settings cogwheel. So I could have, like the name of the files. If I was doing something like, batch exporting where I had, kick, snare, hi-hat. So we could carry the name over. Now we also have free text. So let's say if I wanted to have free text, at this point, we could just double click and you could say, okay, I just want to put my name. So we'll say, okay, I want the audio file itself to have, my name in every single file so that that's kind of associated with the file. So if you just kind of double click here, you could just kind of change the name of whatever you want it to be to include, just whatever text that you want. And then, maybe I want the project name, if I want it to be stereo mono. So at this point you could choose, to have, so you could say, okay, we're going to take the name of the audio file, the free text where you just typed in your name, Mark Rabin, the name of the project. You could also put, the channel number if you want it. So all these different things, because a lot of times when we run into like people doing music for libraries or for multiple delivery formats, when they deliver to this network or this production company, they can, or especially with games, they can have very specific naming priorities. So instead of having to manually type all these in, you could just come over here. And again, the free text is kind of for whatever you want it to be. So you could just kind of double click and then type the values in. And that's really kind of all you have to do. So hopefully that makes it a little clearer, Mark. Okay, so we have a question. I see. So a question about files from Michael Pierce. Is there any way during backup for Cubase to also include things like custom IRs and reverence in the backup, or I don't know, Groove Agent drum samples in the backup folder? So usually with the if you have custom IRs, I know people that will often keep sample folders. So what I see a lot of people do if they have, let's say, a Groove Agent or, so let's say we had Groove Agent used in a project and we had a custom kit. So it's not going to be automatically created, but what I see a lot of people do is just, do an export kit with samples and save it to the backup folder. And Hallian has something very similar. I don't know of a way to automatically export the IRs that were used for reverence, since there isn't like an export command, but you could, but I've seen people, have IRs for the reverb and maybe guitar cabinets, and they just, store it manually, but it's not currently a part of the backup project. I have mentioned that to development team that, it would be, to the project planning, that would be kind of an interesting thing with all of your content for Hallian and Groove Agent to have that as part of the project backup as well. But there's a lot of kind of further implications that could happen as a result of that as well. Okay, so all right, so we have a question. Hi there, I have a question. Maybe one of you can answer it. I would like to compose a piece to a video. My video format is MP4. So, but when I import it into Cubase, the video player does not work properly. It goes black and white and has problems playing the video. Does anyone have the same issue? So, when your, video files aren't very consistent, so when you have MP4, unlike a WAV file that could be loaded into anything that has a WAV file, we could think of that as kind of like almost a container type. So, video files are a combination of the container types and the codec that are used, and those are really critical. So there could be 14 million versions of an MP4 file. So if you go to, you want to make sure that it's going to be a proper, combination of codec and container type. So if we just say, and if you go to, so you may have to convert the video file. So if you just do a quick Google search, so it's probably like H264, but there is a Steinberg kind of article based, you just do video support Nuendo Cubase. You could now go directly to, and this will tell you, all the supported video formats and frame rates. So to contain, for the different containers and different codecs and which ones will be supported. So, just because it's an MP4 file, it could be like, a million variations of an MP4 file. So once you get it into one of these containers and codec, that you should be all set. So just just do a quick Google of video support in Nuendo, Cubase, Wavelab, and Dorco, and that should do the trick for you. So get it into the right codec and container combination, and then you should be good. All right, so we have Venezuela has made the live stream. Thanks for joining us. And we also see, I see from Millard Brown, it says he uses an open source program called Handbrake to pre-process any difficult videos. So that's a common conversion tool that's free. Okay, so we just see, I'm a little confused about what Cubase Pro 11 comes with. Is Spectral Layers 1, Hallian Sonic SE, Groove Agent SE, etc. included, or do they need to be purchased separately? So all those programs that you mentioned are included with Cubase Pro 11, and one way to kind of determine it is if you go to the Steinberg Download Assistant. Once you kind of click on Cubase 11, so just launch this, you'll see kind of just a whole big list of different content. So, with Cubase 11, they kind of broke down the content to into sections. To make the download not so large. Let me just... So to determine what comes with Cubase Pro 11, just come to, if you go to the Steinberg Download Assistant, select Cubase Pro 11, all of these different aspects and all these different contents and instruments, these are all licensed with Cubase Pro 11. So you'll see that you'll have Spectral Layers 1, Hallian Sonic SE, Groove Agent SE, Retrolog 2, Pad Shop 2, and lots of content. So all that, so once you select this, that will show you everything that's included with Cubase Pro 11. So while you can download other things, you probably, unless you have the license for it, it won't work inside of your Cubase. So. All right, so we see Ken is just reminding folks, remember to hit the like button. If you don't, you'll feel a disturbance in the force, and you can't do that on May 4th. All right, so just see question. I also have the problem with Spectral Layers. It did not come with my Cubase 11 Pro. So your Cubase 11 Pro comes with Spectral Layers 1. And if you go to the Steinberg Download Assistant where we just were, you just need to install the Spectral Layers license. So all you have to do is just install the Spectral Layers program. And once you install that, then it's not going to necessarily show up as a plugin, but you'll see it under extensions. So when we go... So make sure, that you have it downloaded from, you say Cubase Pro 11, and you'll see Spectral Layers. but it may not just show up as a plugin, but when you have an audio source, and because it's an extension, so what it's going to do is we can say go to your audio and then to extensions. So we'll select, and now you'll see spectral layer show up there. And now this will launch because it's an ARA2 format. So it's kind of more not a traditional plugin format, but more of an editor extension. So that will allow you to then launch spectral layers. So if you're looking for it in a plugin, try going to audio, select an audio event and go to audio to extensions, and then you should see it. Okay, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Now all the ice cream giveaways are going to start. Yeah, so with Tanmay's question about the Thunderbolt icon, so if it's maybe this up here, and what this would allow you to do is to, we can have multiple projects open. So, and this is, maybe the question regarding the Thunderbolt icon. So if you just click here, I could just now, once I click that, that is the active project. So that's what that allows you to do is if you have multiple projects open, you could switch between which project is currently active when when this icon turns to an orange background. So let us know, Tammy, if that's it. All right, so we have Green Sangeet checking in from India. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question wondering about the best way to reverse, retrograde, and invert melodic material in Cubase. Is it via the logical editor? So if I wanted to take, I'll just take just a little part of this Bach piece here and move it out. All right. Just make this smaller here. Okay, so let's say if I have just this little part here. So there are some, I don't think that there's like retrograde, but, there's a couple things that you could do. So if I wanted to take, this selection of notes, you could go to MIDI, and go to functions menu. So here, if you want it to, reverse or mirror the different tasks, you could come here and do some stuff like that. So it's not necessarily within the logical editor. So there isn't a retrograde or, but you could try those two things from the functions menu, try, the reverse and mirror, and, check that out. But so that's where you would find it. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to audition plugins within the same track, automatically bypass one by enabling the second? So you could probably do something like this maybe through like the snapshots. So let's say, if I was just here and let's say if I have just a quick audio file. Okay. So let's say I drop this in, and I wanted to try out 2 different ideas in the mix console. So it's not where you could, if you wanted to, so you could do kind of odd, so we'll show you 2 different approaches. So let's say if I wanted to come here and I wanted to see whether it was, better between 2 different plugins. So let's say, okay, I want to know if it's better with the flanger, or with a chorusing, or let's say phaser. So okay, so now we have these 2. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and choose to bypass one of the effects. And then what you could do in the mix console here is take a snapshot. And let's come over here. Let's say now I want it. So I could take a snapshot of that. So I could just say, so as we do this, and then recall snapshot 2, and I'll just turn off the message. So as we wanted to just kind of go back and forth. And I'll just put this in. So that's a way that you could kind of A/B between different sets of plugins. And once you get it into snapshots, once you get into it a bit more, you could then, once you get into the snapshots, you could also just come over here and say, I only wanted to recall the inserts, but not the EQs or the sends or the pan. So you could pick and choose different components. So that's one way to do it, is just through kind of mix console snapshots. And you could also have this only on the selected channel. So you could just do it on one channel and toggle between different insert effects on a particular track. Okay, reading through some of the comments. Thanks for all the wonderful comments, and appreciate all the great discussion. Okay, so we have a question. When I record my guitar with my Focusrite, I get clicking noises in my speakers. Why do I get those? And why does the program mute sound in the background when using Cubase 11 LE/AI? So when you're, it could be that your audio interface is, maybe the buffer is set too low. So I would try to come over here, go to your studio, to studio setup. And at this point, I would choose, you'll see select your Focusrite interface, go to your control panel, and try to increase the buffer size. So if you have that kind of dialed in really low, try increasing that. That will increase the latency. But it could be that the latency that you have set is too low for your audio interface on your system, and that's what's often causing crackling. Now, one of the other settings that you could do is if you go to the audio system, it says, why does the program mute sound in the background? So if it's, I'm not sure if it's the sound in the background is from like a different program, like maybe YouTube in a web browser. If that's the case, you could select the studio to studio setup, select the audio system, and then choose, just place a check in release driver when application is in background. But if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. All right, great to see Space Crawler on. Okay, so we see from Matt Elliston says, "Hi Greg, addicted to the Hangout. Excellent work you do. Thanks for the kind words." All right. My chat field moved on me, so I'll try to get back to where I was. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, found my place again. Okay, so we see just a question. Greg, thanks for answering my question about collapsing lanes into one. Can multiple MIDI parts that exist on different lanes and then combine those MIDI parts to a single lane? All right, so let's say I'll come here and I'll just do a horrible quick MIDI record. So, and we could kind of just place this. There's different MIDI record modes. So I'll do cycled. So, you know, if you wanted to merge the different, you know, let's say if I just record MIDI parts here, and I think this, so if you go to the MIDI record modes, you could choose to merge. So now every time I record, I could just play kind of one note. Sorry, it's an annoying loop. And now when I record again, I'll play a second note. And now all of those different notes those different passes would be recorded onto the same track. And that's because I had the MIDI set to merge. Now, let's say if I was in more of a cycle record mode and I selected stacked, that at this point, when I record, so I'll just hit. So as we do this now, these different MIDI parts are all together. So I think that if we drag these two over top of each other, and let's say I drag this on top and this on top, let's try to just grab the glue gun. I think it's maybe Alt and a glue gun. So now if you just drag all the lanes and grab the glue tool and then just click on the Alt, now all the different lanes will be merged into one nice happy part. Okay, reading through comments. All right. Question: do you know how to get quadrafuzz for FL Studio? So I think quadrafuzz is going to be kind of linked to Cubase. So, you know, if you have Cubase, you could just run the audio in, you know, and process it through quadrafuzz in Cubase and then load it into FL Studio. So it's kind of a plugin that's going to be tied to Cubase. I don't know a way to make it work in FL Studio. So I'm sure that FL Studio has plugins that won't work in Cubase either. Okay, so I just see from Mark Rabin, Greg, I don't get the handles on the edges of the lanes. All right, so let's take a look at, jump back to my project here, and let me just activate it. And I'll revert the project here. Okay, so let me know if, so when I kind of hover over the events, at this point we could see the handles, but they don't appear until you hover over them. If these are all set up as parts, so let's say if I go to audio and all right, so let's say if I just go to this particular event here, you know, so maybe if you're working with parts, so let's say if I drag this out and if I turn this into, sorry, let me just, so if I select these, you can say events to part. So there you may not see the handles. If that's the case, you know, see if when you select it, if you see dissolve parts. So if it's a part, you could turn it into an event. But now you could just kind of, you know, as soon as you hover over, so sometimes stuff isn't active to be kind of a visual deterrent or a visual distraction while you're editing until you're kind of hovering over that particular aspect of the program. Okay, wonderful to see Alex Morgan on the live stream. So his question is there a way to change new tracks default output to something other than stereo out? Would be very helpful. So I think when you go to add a track, you know, at this point you could just route it to any output device. And you can say, okay, if I wanted to add, you know, 6 mono tracks, they're all being routed out to group 1. I could do that. So, you know, maybe if you haven't experimented with just the add tracks dialog, as soon as you do that you could choose whatever destination, but I think it'll go to maybe the top choice that you have in the file. So based on your outputs. So if I wanted to go to my audio connections, let's go to the outputs. I'll remove this and let's add a mono out, and let's add a stereo out. So now when I go to add a track, my mono out will be default since that's the very top of the choice, but you can still just kind of change that. So whatever the top default setting is in your audio connections, that will be the default mode. But you could add multiple, you know, channels easily. So let me know if that works for you, Alex. All right, so we have Midnight Shadow checking in from Ireland. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so just kind of clarification. I see Michael Pierce says he hasn't thought about this, but are the internal plugins like Quadrafuzz standard VSTs? So if you had Cubase installed, they would appear in other VST capable software. So they are standard VSTs, but I think that they're limited to only functioning inside of Cubase. That's pretty typical function. Okay, so just see, is there a way to bring I guess it says muted part from the lower to the top layer in the project window? In Blender 3D, I can hold down Alt key while clicking on an object to toggle between all layered objects. So I think we might just have to use kind of the comp tool, but I think there's a way to do this if I remember. So let's say if I have, I have multiple takes here. If we go to the bottom center, now you could switch between the different takes. So this way you don't have to open up the lanes, but go to the bottom center, and you could just select which take is currently active. Just right there. So as soon as you hover over, you'll see kind of the bottom center, a little drop down arrow, and that way you could just switch between which is the current active take. So let me know if that works for you, Space Crawler. See Michael Teams being very generous with his virtual ice cream delivery service again. Everyone appreciates it, and I'm glad to see Sable getting 2 scoops of strawberry ice cream. Okay, so we see Fred is watching from Kenya. I have a problem with Cubase 11 quantize and metronome. So if we have, let's say, just do a new project here. Okay, so let's say I'll just come to a quick string part. All right, and I'm going to, let's say I'll just kind of hit play. All right, so I'll make sure we have our metronome. Okay, so I will now hit record. All right, so now I could hear the metronome. Let's go ahead and. So I played mostly quarter notes, but I will have eighth notes. So if I wanted to quantize this, say I wanted to quantize it to eighth notes, and then I could just hit quantize. So, but it seems to kind of work as expected to me. But if there's, Fred, if there's any particular questions that you have about that, if something is not quantizing as expected or what values you're using, that information could be helpful. Okay. So, a question. Greg, would you know why Cubase flags isotope plugins as blacklisted? A lot of times when isotope plugins are installed, it could be installing a 32-bit version. It could be installing a VST2 version, and the VST3 version is more stable. So when a plugin gets blacklisted, it's not just, a random thing. It's actually failed a stability test. So it does a quick analysis, and it's determined that this plugin is going to cause system instabilities. And sometimes people are shocked that, some plugins like Isotope, even at 64-bit VST3, will be blacklisted, and they're blacklisted for a reason. So a lot of people were shocked initially when we started doing it, and then they're like, oh, that plugin does cause issues on my system. So just make sure that you're not installing the 32-bit, and you're only installing the VST3, and that may clear it up. And if it doesn't, you could always try. And this is, again, it's been kind of deemed a unstable plugin, but you could go to your VST plugin manager, and then it's called the block list. Sorry if I said it wrong. And at this point, you could choose to select it, and at this point, you could reactivate the plugin. But again, that could be causing, instabilities on your system. But make sure it's the VST3, the latest VST3 version, as well as 64-bit, and only those are installed. And you didn't do just kind of a global install of different formats, different bit depths for the memory addressable bits for the plugin itself. Okay, so we have a question. Does anyone know how to find a lost audio part that is long gone, or is it gone forever? So if you have, erased it from your computer's hard disk, there's a chance that it is gone forever at that point if there isn't a backup. So if it's still on your computer's hard disk, you could just, have Cubase search for the audio file. And you could do this like in the pool window. This should give you kind of an idea. You could see all of the audio files in the project and their path, and your Cubase will ask you if you want to look in a particular folder, or if but if the audio file was permanently deleted off of the computer, there's not much Cubase can do to make that come back if it was physically removed from the hard disk. All right, so we have Peter checking in from Canada, and Soren from Sweden. All right, so we have Boomspot checking in from San Francisco. All right, wonderful to see Chase Bethia on the live stream. Okay, so we have a question. Why doesn't Cubase allow imports of M4A audio files? Always had to convert externally into, say, a wave first. Maybe there's a faster trick. So a lot of people would just take that, into, iTunes is a very easy way to turn that into a standard WAV file, but there's like a zillion ways to have it automatically convert to a standard WAV file on import, or batch importing. But Cubase, sometimes we can't support every compressed file format. But a lot of people use iTunes just to do conversion quite quickly. Okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions and discussions. Okay, so I just see a question. So it says, hi, I'm waiting for your email. So from the Mystic. So I guess If you wanted to email me a question, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so I just see from Chase, if I found a typo in a website, do I send a screenshot to you? Yeah, so, sometimes, we've done it before where there's, a typo and someone will send it in and I'll send it to the appropriate marketing manager and they could usually take care of it. But yeah, please forward that over, Chase. And thanks for passing it along. Okay, just continue to read through. Okay, still reading through. Okay, so we just see having trouble finding very audio on the inspector. Bail me out, Sir Greg. This is from Michael Teams. All right, so one, make sure that you have an audio file selected and not a MIDI file. So let's come over here. Let's say if I just have an audio file here. So make sure, because when we do this, you may have the track selected, but what you need to do is to double click and be in the sample editor. So you see that the inspector settings can change between the track and the event. So double clicking on the event, and at that point you'll see vary audio. But if you kind of switch the focus to the track, you don't see vary audio. But double clicking on the event, that will open the sample editor inspector. And from there you see vary audio where you could do your editing. So try that, Michael. Let us know how it works. All right, so we see Mark from Kenya says he's learning so much. Wow. So thanks for joining us. We're glad you could be a part of the live stream. All right, so Shark Dog 2 is checking in. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Gareth is wondering where Pablo is. So yes, Pablo is absent today. I haven't seen a comment from him. So if you talk to him, Gareth, tell him we missed him. Okay, so Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we're seeing some people saying snapshot is killer. Just realized snapshots. It's a great little function. Okay, so a question from Norton and Augusta. Having trouble assigning MIDI keyboard mod wheel to control volume, expression on Halley and SE. I could do MIDI Learn and some other plugins with Windows 10 Pro 11. So if you wanted to, let's say if I'm here, okay, so let's say I'm on a string patch and I wanted this to control, so let's say if I'm in a sustain patch here. And if I wanted to take my modulation wheel and so you're going to take your keyboard mod wheel to control volume, expression on Halley and SE. So let's say all you have to do is, so we're seeing modulation data. So let's go to, let's say, our MIDI insert, and we'll just open up our MIDI monitor here. And I'll just, okay, so now I move my modulation wheel. We see controller 1. So what you could do is you could come to what's called the input transformer. And we could do this globally or just locally on a particular track. We could activate the our module, and we have 4 modules at once. So what I want to do is to transform type is equal to controller, and we could say value 1 of that controller is 1. Okay, so we're going to say we're going to take modulation, and if I wanted to convert this into volume, at this point I would say value 1 we want to add, and volume is CC7. So now I want to add, so 1 plus 6 is 7. So now when I move my modulation wheel, it's spitting out controller 7. Now if I wanted to add 10, that's what expression is. So now my modulation wheel is spitting out controller 11. I deactivate. It's back to controller 1. Now my mod wheel is controller 11. And if I wanted to, turn that into, controller, again, just come here and say, now it's going to be controller 1, activate the module. It's now controller 7. So that's some ways you could do that. So again, to get to the input transformer, you see this little kind of squiggly line. So this will take the incoming MIDI information and transform it to other values. So give that a shot, and I think that will do the trick for you, Norton. All right, so you see HH says, I need more like buttons. So make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. All right, so we see John Costigan. Thanks, Greg, for the snapshot use tip for A/B effects and EQ comparisons. It's a revelation. All right, so we see 2009 Tosh is apologizing for being late, and he has a note. So we're not in school. You don't have to worry about it. I won't tell anyone. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me. Bear with me while I find my place again. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so a question. I've been using Ableton, and people keep telling me Cubase is better, but not giving any reason as to why. What are the differences between the two that could help with melodic genres? So I don't run Ableton, but I think that what you would find is that Cubase doesn't predispose you to particular workflows. So if you wanted to do EDM, Cubase is a wonderful tool for that. If you wanted to do really heavy orchestral, type of, Marvel movie, film composition, Cubase will do a great job for that. If you're recording bands and, want pristine audio, Cubase is a wonderful source for that. So I think that what you would see is that, I see some people use one tool for audio, one tool for MIDI, one for kind of loops, that they're using 3 different programs. And often, it makes a lot more sense to learn one program that you could do multiple different types of tasks with very easily. So, but if you let us, just kind of watching, you could probably pick up some more workflows if you have particular, functions that you want to learn. But I think that you'd find Cubase is a bit more well-rounded than the other programs on the market. All right. We have Dirk checking in from Germany. All right, so we see Pablo has made the live stream. So we missed you, Pablo. Thanks for making it. All right, we have Barry Williams just joined from Trinidad. So a beautiful part of the world. I haven't been to Trinidad, but been out to Barbados. It's beautiful. Okay, so you see how to link, drag the post fader in Mixer. I can't do it in Cubase 11. 9.5 was okay. Okay, so let's come over here. I'll just add some audio files. Okay, and I'll just add an effects channel to the selected. So okay, so let's say I wanted these all. Okay, so let's say I have quick link enabled. I go to my sends, so I assume that if I wanted to come here so we could adjust all the sends. So that's all post fader. These are all pre fader. So how to link, drag the post fader in Mixer. So, make sure that you have the Q link turned on or that you're holding down Alt plus Shift. And let me know if that's what you want to do. And I'll just switch back to post fader on all of them. So let's say. So now just, make sure you have the quick link active, and you can do that with Option plus Shift or Alt plus Shift. And then you could adjust just like that. So let me know if that's what you wanted to know. I think it's Eru or Eru. Okay, so just see from harder, darker, faster, and this may be kind of a clarification on a previous question, maybe about the Focusrite. It says, didn't solve it. I used a generic low latency driver, and it's released in the background, but it still kills YouTube and other sounds when using the program. So if you have an audio interface, and I think this might be the Focusrite question that we had earlier. So, if you have the audio interface, don't use a generic low latency driver. Use install the actual dedicated ASIO driver for the device itself. So you'll get much better kind of performance and much better latency. So make sure that when you go to the studio setup, that for your audio system that you should see like your Focusrite driver there as opposed to your generic low latency ASIO driver. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to play, for example, a drum loop in Groove Agent by pressing a keyboard key once and it's played in a loop until the key is pressed a second time? So let's take a look. I think we might be able to do that, but we'll go to Groove Agent SE here. Just Okay, so I'm just going to drag this to a particular instrument. Okay, let me just... Okay, so I could just, in the sample editor, where it says one shot, I'm just going to select until release. All right, so it just started over again. We can see kind of the little bar here go along. So as we play, so as soon as I release, then it stops playing. So just go to select the pad, be an instrument, go to edit to sample, and then you could just choose where it may say one shot by default, and just say until release, and then the loop will continue to play until you release the key. So watch the status bar below the waveform. Now we're back. We did our loop, and then we'll do one more loop. And there you go. So once again, in an instrument, click the edit tab to sample and choose until release. All right, so you see Christian D68 comment came from Cubase and Atari ST to Cubase Pro 11. I must honestly say a few things have been added. Where have been those last 35 years? Yeah, we're glad that you're back. Yeah, I had my Mega 4 ST back in the day with Cubase. Yeah, so Michael Teams has a great comment with someone who was looking for, comparing it. Cubase other programs is like, when was last time, other competitors had classes for DAW. We've been meeting since last spring 2 times a week. So just teaching you about the program. All right, wonderful to see Ian Rushmore. Glad you could make it. All right, so you see Jeff Sabelsky saying, accept the cookies at Steinberg, and now what's on sale? So yeah, I think there's a new promotion starting. So I think Gareth may be interested in this promotion for something he's been looking for a while. So if it hasn't started, I think there's one that's going to start pretty imminently. Okay. So I just see a question. What is this class called? So these are just... we call it a Club Cubase live stream, and it's just people asking any of the questions that they have on Cubase. So it's just kind of a stump the chump kind of format. So if you have a question, something you don't understand, you can just simply ask a question and we'll try to answer it for you. So as you see, hi Greg. Last week you showed how to use a MIDI controller to bring supervision to front and focus. Could we get a hotkey to do the same, please? I don't have a controller and only one monitor. Okay, so probably I don't know of a way to do it with just a hotkey, but let's see if okay, so let me just check out my hotkeys here. So I kind of don't think we could do it through. Take a quick look. Just take a look. Yeah, so I don't know of a key command to do that, but something that you may be able to do if you don't have a keyboard controller, try hitting Alt or Option plus K. And then let's see if this will, if we could map the generic remote controller, so you could have kind of a software MIDI control. So let's see if we could get this to open up. So if you don't have a MIDI controller, it's good to yeah, so I don't know a way to do it, so but if you have anything that could just transmit a single MIDI message, that would do it. So sorry, Ian. I'll pass that along as kind of a feature request, but I don't know a way to do that from just the computer keyboard. All right, so we see, according to Michael Teams, it's Sable is famous. All right. All right, great to see Neurotic Nexus on the live stream. All right, so I think Space Caller has now had his revelation of selecting different takes. All right, so I just see from Moyen Bonin, can you show us how to create your own polypad or using Halion FX 1 through 4, please? So I'm not sure what a polypad is, if it's just kind of a, you know, like if we go into Hallion and layer up pad sounds, if that's what it is. So let's say if I want to add an instrument track. So, you know, if you do it in like Hallion Sonic SE, I can show you a way to kind of create a pad here, and it'd be very similar approach in Hallion as well. So let's say, okay, I wanted my strings full ensemble, and I'll change this more to sustain for our pad. Here, I'll just... And if I wanted to come, and let's find... Okay, so let's say I want that sound kind of layered with the strings, and okay, and let's get another kind of just pad sound. Let's go to maybe Vertigo strings. And let's do maybe more of a so if I wanted all these to be kind of layered together for a poly pad, so I could just take all these and put them all in the same MIDI channel. So now when I play, that you could do stuff like that. But let me know if you're looking for something else for the polypad. All right, seeing kudos going to Jazz Dude for his help in bringing out the Cubase Nation Discord site. Well deserved. And also I'd like to thank Agent K for all the help he does in doing moderation for the live streams here. Okay, reading through comments. Okay. All right. So from Pylon Records, we have Greg. I have some old files from Cubase 5 VST that I believe were saved as MIDI. Excuse me, but it shows up as at exe file on my Mac. Was saved in Mac as well back then. Any idea how we can resurrect that? So if it has a .exe extension, so that's usually like an executable, like a program that's going to execute. If it was saved as a MIDI file, what you might be able to do is just to save it as, try going into the extension of the file itself. So say if you have something like, I have a MIDI file, I probably have one on my desktop. Okay, so if you just come where you see the MIDI, try just adding like a .mid extension. So if you go to rename the file, so just right click and choose rename, try just putting a .mid at the end and see if that would allow you to open it. So generally, executable files are like, what you would, like, you'd launch Cubase.exe on Windows to, start the program. It's the program itself. But if you think it is a MIDI file, select it and try just renaming it and changing the extension to .mid. And as Jazz Dude, if it was Cubase 5 VST, so that would be like a .all or .arr files. If you had Cubase 5, which came out after SX in SX1, 2, 3, that would be a .cpr file. But you could try to just changing it to like a .mid file if you think it's a MIDI file itself. Okay, so we have a question. How do you fix the latency issue when recording? So, latency can be caused by a couple of different things. So one, it could be caused by the buffer of your audio interface. So depending on how your computer is running, you may have to increase the buffer to, and as your project grows more complex, you may have to just go into and if you have a high buffer here that was maybe set for mixing, you could lower the buffer size to where you don't hear any clicks or crackles. And at that point, so let's say if I go to 128 samples on my buffer, I could see that I'm running at about 4.9 milliseconds of latency. So that's pretty reasonable for a lot of people tracking. What often causes this problem is having different plugins in the project. And we could think of these plugins in the project as almost having like a latency, like they'll have some of the plugins, like the bigger, more complex algorithms may have a higher latency to do all of the processing needed to do for that particular plugin. Now, if you have these plugins scattered throughout your entire project, and if you wanted to temporarily bypass those plugins for your recording, what you could do is just enable the constrained delay compensation. So in the bottom left-hand corner, and this is in Cubase 10, and later it's the bottom left-hand corner, and it's in the top left-hand corner in earlier versions. And what this does is it will bypass plugins that are causing a lot of latency during your recording process. And then you could just simply, instead of going through one by one, deactivating or bypassing 200 plugins, you could choose to just come here and constrain delay compensation. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Does Iconica ensembles come with or use articulation maps or not? Iconica Opus is a bit pricey for me. It makes me sad to laugh. Oh well, laughing out loud. I can handle the price break nor for ensembles. So when we so we'll just go ahead and load up one here. So and these will kind of automatically be generated. So let's go ahead and load up instruments here. So let's say our High Sonic SE, and let's go for the ensembles. So as I wanted to come here, I could just go to my brass full ensemble and let's take a look at. So here, we could choose between, our different. And we'll just switch over to sustain. And let's say our staccatissimo. So now if I wanted to just go to this part, let's say I have an event selected, I could double click and let's go to the expression map, and you could just say import to key switches. And now we could just see all the key switches automatically just show up. And as we click in the different articulations, you could just add more articulations kind of as you see fit. So if I just wanted to now add marcato, we could do that. And again, I'll just import the key switches, and now we'll see the marcato automatically just add it in. So yeah, the ensemble. All right. So to see Gareth, we missed having you on the Zoom as well. Hopefully next time. I think it's May 28th or something. But Michael Teams was saying that you have more tunes coming, so look forward to playing bass on some for you. All right, so we see Michael Teams also figured out his Very Audio, so it's great. All right, so my chat field just jumped on me. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think I'm near back to where I was. Okay, it says I want to know better how to use Hallian effects number 1 to 4 to possible to be to better create my own sounds. So if it's in, so I'm not sure if it's the full version of Hallian, but let's go ahead and go to the full version. Okay, so I will come over here. Let's just do a quick studio strings patch. Okay, so let's go to our mixer. So at this point, we could have, let's say within the studio strings, if you wanted to add, an effects bus, you could come over here, say, okay, you wanted to add a new effect. So let's add a delay. So at this point, we could say we have reverb. I could also just add a delay. So you could hear that delay. And then if you wanted to edit the different components here, you could also, choose. So you could add effects directly there. You could also just say, okay, I want to take my effects, and let's say at this point we could go directly over to like the master output if we wanted to. You could also just say, okay, at this point, I wanted to add different effects here. So let's say I wanted to do like a flanger, and these could be added on the tracks, on individual samples and individual layers. So, that gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility that you can have. So once you kind of get into like the mixer section, you could expand, and then that could give you, multiple different effects as you, want it to do different work here. So if you say, okay, if you want some of the legacy plugins, or let's just add a wah-wah pedal to this, I could just now come here. And then if you wanted to, just go to, you could have different, presets for each of these plugins. So as you select them here, they will just kind of automatically just appear. So you could do a lot of flexibility with sound design directly inside of Halion. All right, so I'm just seeing Jazz Dude just tried changing it to CPR and to mid, and no luck. The file's exec, trying to bring back Cubase 5 to resurrect these songs from ages ago. So I don't think that was ever a Cubase extension. So, but let me know kind of what you find. Okay, just read through more comments. Okay, so we have a question. Can you show control room features? How do we send individual mixes to artists via control room, and what physical connections devices are needed? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. All right, so let's say I have like a rock band project here, and I wanted to create individual headphone mixes for different musicians. All right, so what we could do is we could have up to 4 different Q mixes set up. So I could now go to my audio connections, and I could say, okay, I want it. Let's say for this, I want a guitar, bass, and drums connected for their individual headphone mixes. Okay, so I'm going to, in my audio connection setup, I would add these, just right click and add a Q mix. So we'll go ahead and we'll just call this Vox. Okay. So what I want to do now is we could take these, we need to connect these to our converter, our digital to analog converter. And this could go either be routed in your converter to a headphone out or be fed into a headphone distribution system. So we'll need analog outputs, maybe 1/4 inch or XLR outputs going, if we need to go into like a headphone amp, we would just take those cables connected to a headphone amp, and that's what we would place near the musician. I would come over here and make sure that in the racks that you have Q sends checked. Once we have these Q sends checked, I could see my 4 Q sends here as we look at it. And what I want to do is first I'm going to select all the channels in the project. So I'll say, let's take our kick track, and I'll take all of my tracks, and I'm going to select them. And what I want to do is, and once our Q mixes have been defined, we could right click in our Q mix. I want to say all Qs I want to activate. So just right click, and we'll go to all Qs, and let's activate Q sends. So I'm going to enable the Q mix. And what I want to do is a more me headphone mix. So I'm going to come over here and say, let's use the current pan settings. And what this will do is copy the pan settings I have in my mix. And I want to use the current mix levels. So what this is going to do is mimic the faders directly into my Q mixes here. Now, let's take just a second to replicate all of that information. All right, so now when we go, we're going to have everyone hear exactly what we see in our headphone mix. And when we look at this, we can say this headphone mix is bass. So if I wanted this kick to go more to the bass player's headphone mix, I would just move the fader over. So let's say I have drums. So I want to take my drum tracks here, select these, and then I'll hold down, just enable my quick link. So I want more of the drums to be sent to the drummer. I want more of the bass to be sent to the bass player. And let's say our guitar parts, I want to take these guitar parts and send more of these to our guitar player. So let's say we'll just kind of come over here. So now everyone can have what they often call a more me headphone mix. Now how I switch between the headphone mixes is as I'm playing, I could just listen to what's in the studio. And I go to Q mix 1. And here I could just say, okay, I want the bass to be really loud in Q mix 1. And when I come, let's just... So that's my drummer's headphone mix. So this way you could say the drummer wants to hear more of themselves. And you could just monitor the different headphone mixes. Now, if you're communicating with the musicians and while they're, working in the studio, you could just have your talkback mic, and that's also defined in your studio setup. So you go to your audio connections, you just take an input into your computer, use that as your talkback mic, and then you could enable the talkback on each of the individual Q mixes here. And let's say your drummer doesn't want to hear the click track. You could turn the click track on and off independently. So let's say the singer missed a really obvious cue, and you want to communicate with everyone except the vocalist. You don't want the vocalist to hear your comment in their headphones. So you could enable talkback and say, hey, Joe, the bass player, can you give the vocalist a cue? He can't hear us. Just nod. All right, be happy. Give him a really obvious cue when he needs to come in after the solo. And then, hey, that was a wonderful vocal take, whatever, So you could just set up your own independent headphone mixes that way. And once again, that's saved with the project as well. So that can really, if you need to jump back, you don't have to create a whole new Q mix just for that. All right, so we see Richie Bergman from Northern Germany on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. So what are we doing today? So the live stream, if you haven't been on it, is basically, people ask questions on their Steinberg software, and we try to give answers to help people get the most out of their Steinberg software. Okay. Okay, question. How can we create guitar tabs? Okay, so we need to do this from MIDI data. So let's say if I'm, we'll just try this Bach piece here. This probably work. So let's say if I wanted to go into my score view, I'll just come right over here. We'll open up our score editor. So we see our MIDI data here. So I will just double click to the left, and this will open up the staff settings. Go to tablature, and we'll just activate tablature, and we could choose to mirror the staff and hit apply. And then, if I wanted to not hide the stems, I could just come right over here, and then we could, if I choose to not mirror the staff, we could now just turn that directly into guitar tab. So just double click, and then you'll see the staff tab, and then click on tablature. Okay. Okay, just reading through. Okay, so we just see Jeff Sabelski saying, Iconica, I'm impressed and need my bank card again. So it'll be a wonderful investment for you. Okay. Okay, so I just see from it says about our post fader. It says no, not to send the post fader insert effect. Okay, so let's say if I have, so I'm trying to remember what the original question. Maybe if you could ask the original question again. Is it Iru? But let's say if I have, we jump to quick audio track. All right. So, what you do in, what you have, and I think it was with 10.5 or in 9.5 mentioned, I'm trying to remember the question, but if you have, let's say, an insert here, and let's say, so I have kind of, you could see this little green line, and this green line you can move dynamically. So if you wanted to change if these effects are pre or post fader, so it's just kind of moving the actual green line between them. So let's say I'll just switch this to. So this is how you can determine, just move this green line. So everything above is pre-fader, everything below is post-fader. So, but that's, so I'm not sure if you wanted to link that to multiple tracks. I'll give that a shot here. So say if we go to inserts, let me select some channels. Let's go to inserts. So I think it was maybe if we come here that we could adjust. Let's see if we can do it in the full mix console. right? So say I have these tracks selected. So it looks like it's going to be maybe individual. Let me just, so I have these selected. Yeah, so it looks like this may not follow, because it could be different on every track. But I think the question was, moving moving multiple post faders, or switching to post fader position on multiple tracks at once. So I think it's going to be done individually, but let me know if I misremembered your question, Iru. Okay, so we have a question. How do you properly screen record while recording a VST into Cubase? My speakers crackle when I tried to do both, but never have this issue separately. Sound card is Focusrite 18i20. So the program that I use for screen recording on my Mac is called ScreenFlow. So often when I do this, and its audio capabilities have kind of got in a little strange over the years with some of the changes from Apple. But when ScreenFlow is activated, so let's say if I activate ScreenFlow here, now that ScreenFlow is activated, you could come over here, and when you go to the studio setup, you can see that the audio system can now have a Telestream audio capture device. So that's how I get the audio from Cubase to be, captured with my screen capture program. You might be able, if you're using OBS, you may be able to do something very similar. And configuring OBS, with multiple audio input sources. So if you come here, like I'm just have my Yamaha mixer configured for that. So you may be able to have multiple devices configured in OBS. So okay, so question, does Cubase have a larger user base in Europe than North America? On the YouTube music production vids I watch, if they're European, they use Cubase. If they're USA based, they use Pro Tools. So, we have a tremendous amount of users in North America and United States. So it could be that, Steinberg is able to communicate and reach out to more European content developers because of, it's their home turf, basically. And a lot of the, some of the guys that do videos for Steinberg are, based in Europe, and some of them will be, like consultants that are hired. Some of them are just, are being done a lot in, different relationships with the company. But there's lots of people in the USA running Cubase. So we have questions. So how long is this stream gonna last? We usually go about 4 hours, or until we get all of the questions answered. So I think once I got out like 20 minutes early, but it's usually about 4 hours. And after 4 hours, we lose some of the closed captioning capabilities, which helps people for, for in different languages who, for translating. Just seeing from Jay, it's Greg Undo's amazing mind closes his stream at 5 p.m. Eastern in order to cool down his brain cells, like the Gibson computer from hackers. Likely has tremendous refrigeration to cool processors. So It's funny. So I just stopped because at some point I had to stop, or I could go for hours longer, but I just, then I have to do a longer index. So. Yeah, so seeing some discussion of subtitles. So yeah, usually the live streams, if you have live streams can be, will automatically capture the closed captioning. It shuts off if it's like 4 hours and 1 second long. So it won't do 4 hours. And if you are doing something that's more pre-planned, you could submit a script and then have very kind of accurate closed captioning, and that's localized for different languages. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, I got a big issue with Groove Agent sounds. Don't play for kick and tom when I play all the pattern that I edit. So let's go ahead and load up a Groove Agent file here. Thanks again for all wonderful questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. Okay, so let's say I have a Groove Agent here. Okay, and I have some patterns. So let's say. Okay. So Groove Agent sounds don't play for kick and tom when I play all the patterns that I edit. So if you are, so let's say if I have this pattern here, one of the things that you could check with Groove Agent is if you come to like the little drum map area here, we could choose to, automatically, you could say create drum map from the instrument. So if you do that, now you could see all of the different sounds that are going to be in this particular kit in the drum editor. So you should be able to kind of program and see what all sounds are available. Sometimes what I see people do is they go to like an intro, because these patterns can also be triggered by MIDI, and they may just come here and just kind of hit patterns instead of just the actual sample parts, because those are just kind of notes that are lower. But make sure that as you click here, you could audition and just kind of paint and, enter in any of the sounds. So let me know if that makes sense. And if it didn't help at all, just maybe if we could reiterate the question a little bit. But you should be able to just see that. And while you're playing, let's say if we have a pattern, something that you could do also is, so let's say I'm here and I wanted to change it to a rim shot, is I could take the snare and change the out note. So let's just put this into a quick loop. So, if you wanted to, you could just remap the out notes of your different components as well. So you could just choose to just remap the out note, and then you could play back different sounds. You see, great comment from Fred Robinson. I find our lack of time disturbing. So. All right, so we see Jeff Zabelski just got Iconica ensembles. Congratulations, you'll love it. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Could you show how to colorize all the tracks within a folder all at once? Sometimes it works, others doesn't. Okay, so I think we have. Okay, so I have a folder here. Okay, so let's say our folder is here, and I want to colorize all the tracks. So let's say if I come here, I could select a color tool and say I want all these tracks to be this color. Let me just, sorry. So sometimes like what I just did, which is probably a common mistake that others can make, is I had an event selected. So let's say I wanted all these tracks to be colorized. I could select a color tool and choose my color, and now all of the tracks will be colorized. So again, make sure you don't have an event selected, and then just grab your color tool and that's all you have to do. Okay, so I just see from Pablo that they make discounts of the plugin Steinberg, please. So I think that that there might be a promotion going on. I think that might be starting today. So check out stuff, but just kind of take a look for promotions. It's the start of a new month, so it usually means that there's start of a new promotion. Okay, so we have UR22.1 version, passive electric guitar via high Z input is too hot. Should I use the input without high Z or better use a compressor before the input? So, what you could do is, if usually I found that level has worked pretty well. If you have, I assume that you turn the gain down all the way on the input gain. So make sure that you don't have that. Also, if you have phantom power, you could try to disable that and see if it makes a difference. But another simple solution is having to use a compressor before the input. Might be just to turn the gain, the volume down on a guitar itself and see if that makes a difference. But you could use a compressor to regulate the tempos, but I never had to do it, using, I record my bass, different passive and active basses through the high Z input without any problems. So. See Sable Winter saying Cubase and the Hangouts aren't just a music production software platform, it's a lifestyle. Well, that's a compliment coming from Sable. Okay, So from Ian Rushmore, it says, many thanks, Greg. Supervision is always open behind my project and mixer windows, which I can focus with hotkeys, but not supervision. A hotkey would be awesome. Hope Steinberg agrees. Well, just thinking about that, here's another method that may work for you is just using workspaces. So let's take a look and see if that works for us. So I'll come over here. Let's say I want supervision to look here. So what I want to do is let's add a workspace. And we could call it a global workspace, and we'll call it supervision. Okay. And at this point, I could let's find our keyboard shortcut for global workspaces. So I have this all set up. All right. I have Fred Corey calling me. So I'll call him back in just a couple minutes when I'm done here. All right. So it's going to be option number 1. So when I come here, so at that point, you could just call up, supervision. So, try saving it as a workspace. So now, let's say if I go to a new project, all right, and I hit option 1, it'll just show up. So you could have your supervision just show up. So instead of a key command to open up a specific insert slot, just have that open and try saving it as a global workspace. And then you could, hit a keyboard shortcut to open up your global workspace. I think that will get you to the same exact spot, Ian, without having to do like all sorts of window dancing. All right, so we have heavy D all the way from SA here. So I'm not sure if that's South Africa or South America, but welcome to the live stream. Okay, it says, please, what are you using in making the music? So, the program that we're using here is just Cubase, so we could use the built-in instruments and just audio recordings. So that's kind of what we're using. Okay, so we have a question. Why can't I hear my media bay when I open up the browser? So let's go ahead and, so let's say if I'm in my media bay and I could go to my loops, and if I wanted to just audition, different sounds here, we could hear that immediately. 9 times out of 10, this is because someone has perhaps disabled the control room and they have just the outputs defined. So let's say if I come here, we'll have our interface, and now when I go to click, sometimes you may not hear it. So try to, come and let's see if my control room is still active. So, but try to just come over here and make sure that, because often that's going to be routed through the control room. So make sure that you have the control room and your monitors defined as your output connection there. Okay, so we have a question, Greg. How do you change the main colors of the DAW if you feel it's a little on the dark side? Okay, so what you could do is go to your preferences, and you could go to user interface to color schemes. And here I could say, okay, I want the project area background. I want that brighter. And you could just kind of change the editor area background, focus color, grid line, cycle line. So, try some of these, and then you could get different appearances just kind of right here. And you can make it brighter, darker, whatever you want. And if you totally messed everything up, you could just return to the defaults and hit apply. And okay, so check out these preferences. So go to preferences, user interface to color schemes. Give that a shot, Fred. Okay. Sorry, my chat jumped on me again. All right, so I see Gareth has 2 songs coming before the weekend, so it's good. I was able to use them to get another, get a nice little paying bass gig, which should be good. So thanks, Gareth. Looking forward to playing on the songs. Or you see Rodrigo saying, "I love Cubase, dude." Okay. All right, wonderful to see JVI on the live stream. And hopefully we'll see you on the next Zoom meetup. Okay, so I see from JVI, I see Iconica is on sale again, and I see sadly that I missed the original deal. Instead of the 50% discount, I see this time it's now 30%. Any idea why we had to pay more now? So I think, the initial one was like a launch price. So, it's still 30% off the normal price. So, you don't have to, you could pay 30% more later if you want, or you could save 30%. So. Okay, so just see question, how can I change the mouse wheel options so that I could zoom in and out where the tracks are? So I think if you just hold down, I'll just get a project that actually has something in it. So if I'm here, I could just hold down the control or command key while you're in the project window, and you could just come right over here and zoom in and out horizontally. That's all you had to do. So my cursor is here. I could zoom right in and out based on that point. All right, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so we have a question. Hi from Finland, and thanks, Greg, for Super Channel. Is there a quick way to momentarily change the overall playback speed of the whole project when using tempo maps with variable tempos? Okay, so let me just find something that's varying tempo here. Let's do a little Schubert piece. Okay, so let's say we have our tempo map, which is varying here. So let's say I want to take my tempo map, and if I go to my project logical editor, I'll just come over here. So let's do our project logical editor, and let's say we want to transform. Media type is equal to tempo, and let's come over here. I'll say trim, and let's multiply by 0.5. Okay. So let's say while we're doing this, hit apply. I could undo. So I can say let's multiply it by 2. So now our tempo will double. Or let's multiply by 1.5. .8. So I would try the project logical editor, and you could save those as different presets and call them up with keyboard shortcuts as you like. All right. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question. What is the difference between pre and post fader? What should I use in send bus, reverb delay, pre or post settings? So it really, neither of them is wrong. It's just one of them, the amount of reverb that will be sent to it will be affected by by where the, fader is. So let's say if I wanted to we'll just go to here, something that has kind of an exposed reverb on a vocal. So let's we'll just kind of listen to this, and we'll open up, let's say, our vocal channel. So right now I have this as a as post fader. So when I listen to So when I do this, we're getting this is affecting the gain structure of the effect. But if I move this to pre-fader, I could still hear the reverb. That reverb balance, the gain structure of the reverb isn't affected by the vocal position. But when it's in post-fader, when I move that down, we don't have any of the reverb going to the voice. So, and again, let's say pre-fader. So now as we listen to it, I drop the fader. That's not affecting the amount of reverb going to the vocal. So you could do automation and not really affect the reverb balance. So that's really kind of the difference between them. Okay, so wonderful to see Graham from Royal Wootton Bassett in the UK. Thanks for joining us again. Great to see you. Okay, so we have a question. Just to clarify, Steinberg is doing away with the dongle for security. So Steinberg has indicated that they will be migrating away from the from the USB-E licensor. So they haven't, they just kind of made the announcement that they're planning on doing that. So I'm not sure when the actual implementation will take place, but they have made the announcement just to give everyone kind of a heads up that it will be coming. So okay, so I just see a question from JVI. So if you have any experience in Matter, thinking of buying a touchscreen monitor, how well does that work with Cubase? All input is welcome. So there's a lot of people using it to drive like more controls, a lot of control surface functionalities. So I'm not sure if Cubase is multi-touch, like if you put 8 fingers and want to kind of mix like a traditional mixer. There are some software solutions for that though that people use. I don't personally have a touch screen, but lots of people do. Okay, so I just see a question. How do you stream? I can't stream Cubase in any software. So how I have mine set up is I'm using Zoom, and I take the audio output of my UR24C that Cubase uses, and I feed that and my microphone directly into a mixer from Yamaha, a Yamaha mixer that has a USB output, and that's what Zoom is seeing as my Yamaha USB, and that way I could mute the mixer for a cough, and I could switch sample rates and not have any worries. So I kind of do a 2 audio card approach, but I just take a screen capture from my computer screen. My microphone and my audio interface from Cubase are going into a Yamaha USB mixer, and the USB mixer is what's being heard on this stream. Okay, reading through. All right, reading through lots of questions. All right, so we see Space Crawler is using an Acer touchscreen in conjunction with his CC121. And now it's like the last hour of the live stream and people start talking about coffee. It's unfair. All right. I'll get a mocha after the live stream here. Okay, so we have a question. The transport bar F2, how can I make it bigger, fatter, taller, etc.? So it's kind of fixed to kind of take up less space. So it's not really adjustable. So it just kind of goes on vertically. I've seen some people, looking for like different functions that will, to get more functions, will just take like this, almost create like two different levels of transport and have this on the bottom. So, some people do that, but the height is currently fixed just to kind of make sure it fits in with. All right, so we see E Junior. Hey, Greg, was that Fred Corey who played drums with Cinderella? If so, tell him he's missed and always loved his playing. Still got Night Songs and LP. Yeah, so it was Fred, and Fred is one of my favorite people in the industry. Just a joy. So, but he's doing wonderful. He's a wonderful composer for TV and film stuff, as well as still playing occasionally. But yeah, that was Fred. So, and he helped me out a lot because one of my college roommates had his 50th birthday recently. And, Fred is good friends with Debbie Gibson, who my college roommate had a huge crush on. So I called in a favor to Fred, and he was able to get a quick, Debbie Gibson birthday video that made my college roommate very happy. So, but yeah, Fred's one of my favorite people. I'll make sure to pass it on. All right. All right, so question, is there a way one can have the audio channels and buses automatically map when you change the interfaces? So a lot of times when you switch interfaces, some people will just use, for the inputs and outputs and your groups. So the groups you can't really say, but the inputs and outputs, you could store presets. So I know a lot of people will store a preset if they're using just a USB out, or if they're like a 2-in 2-out portable interface, or versus kind of a 24-in 24-out interface, and they could have presets that will be mapped. So that's kind of the best way probably to approach it. All right, I think my chat has jumped on me, so let me just find my spot. Okay. Okay, so I just see, hey Greg, when I play normally back my music, everything is fine, but when I use the preview listen, that little speaker icon next to the color tools, and click on a clip, then it's way too loud. All right, so let's say if I'm kind of listening, and let's say if I switch now. Be someone tonight. Can I see? All right, so generally it gets, when you do this, it's routed through the control room. So I'm not sure if there's any, so this gain structure, if I play it with this, will be, let me just set up my CC121 to control the control room volume. Bear with me just for a second. All right. So when I come here, so this is when we kind of monitor, like this is only going through the control room. So I'm not sure if you have any processing like inserts on the control room bus, but it shouldn't be like, or if there's dynamics, because when we do this, it's going to, if we play, so here we could hear, we hear the reverb and any compression, but when we do this is we're just listening to the raw audio file. So maybe you have different dynamics controls on the file, and then when you are auditioning it, it just goes through the listen bus without any of the real-time processing. So maybe if you have a compressor on, then you're playing it back without a compressor. That's what's causing it. Okay, so we have someone checking in from Melbourne, Australia. That's wonderful. One of my favorite cities I've ever been to in the world. So question is, are there any plans for more than 8 quick controls per track in the future, or even macro QC like Ableton? So I think that there is plans to, expand some of the MIDI remote capabilities and control capabilities. One thing that a lot of people miss, and I was just helping out a composer, Paul Hasslinger, with this, I think it was just last week. So let's say if I have, an instrument and I have like a number of quick controls, what a lot of people miss, this will give you kind of your default quick control values that you can access, here for these 8 parameters, but you could just load up another preset. So let's say, okay, I just want it to come here, and let's activate the quick controls, and I just want to control different parameters. I could just kind of populate these and store them as a preset. So as we just wanted to come here, click right here just to the right of quick controls, and then we'll just add a quick preset. So now when I wanted to just, load up let's add another instrument track of Retrolog, I could have the default settings, and I could just come right over here and have these other settings. So while you can have 8 at a time, you could just simply call these up via presets. So that may be something to kind of look into, but I think we might see, I've heard some discussion of, expanding this whole concept and interacting with MIDI controllers a bit easier. And right, great to see Ted Springman on the live stream. Okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussions. Okay, so we just see I'm considering Backbone. So what can Backbone currently do, which cannot be done within the Windows 11 Cubase 11 sampler? So I haven't played with Backbone in a while, so I'm probably really rusty on this. But, some of the things that you could do, there's a lot of like really cool kind of key off stuff that you could do. But, just the library that it comes with and being able to, it's like really specific for being able, so like the sampler track's not only going to work with one sample at a time, but here we could just have, different like, repitching functions, and just kind of the content that it comes with is really pretty spectacular. So not only do you think of it as drums, but it's a really slick kind of sound design tool. So if you want to, and there's a lot of stuff where it's like, as soon as you, wanted to come here and just be able to adjust the pitch. So some people think of it as a bit of a misnomer to call Backbone like a drum synthesizer sampler. But it's really, a very complex sound design solution too. So whereas the sampler track is limited to one sample, you could load up to 8 different samples and manipulate them and be able to kind of decompose different components to isolate the attack versus the tonal aspects and resynthesize. So that's some of the stuff that you get. So, if Backbone is on a current promotion, I would definitely, if you're interested in it, it's worth it not only for the drum sounds you get, but for all like the Robert Dudzik, all the whoosh, all those kind of swooshes like we just played. It's a great collection of that stuff as well. All right. Thanks for all the great discussions. Just reading through. All right, so reading through great discussion of Sherlock, which is like a remote control software done by 14-bit MIDI. It's a wonderful tool. Okay, hi Greg. How can I save the custom project colors when I want to use other one project using? Okay, so I'm not sure if it's like the with these. So if it's the projects used for events or the project. So if you wanted to, like for the backgrounds and those functions, you can just come over here to the preferences and you could store, once you've made all the settings, you could store it as a custom preference. If it's dealing with audio, like the event colors, you could try just going into the project colors setup. And once you do this, you could so say, okay, this is my project color setups, and then you could go to options, and then you could, store these. There's different presets, but you could also go to options and store the color set as default. So at that point, you should be able to just, be able to have the different color settings preserved. So for those colors. All right, so we see Chrome Boys loved Cubase since VST32. All right. All right, we see Michael Pierce has to run. Thanks for joining us, Michael. Great to have you on the live stream. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so just see, hey Greg, I'm getting the Steinberg UR22 again. I tried it before, but I had to take it back. It kept giving me clicks and pops. I don't know what was wrong. So try, the one thing to always try first is try to adjust the buffer size. And let us know on the next live stream after you get it if you're still having issues with it, and make sure that you use the included cable. Sometimes, there's varying degrees of quality for USB cables. So often using the one that's supplied with the unit is recommended. Okay, so we see how can we know if we have double note or overlapping? All right, so let's say if I come here. All right, let me just. Okay, so let's say if I'm. All right, so let's say I have like a little MIDI melody, and I think that like maybe my controller is, moving them on top of each other. So let's say if let's take a look at this. All right, so I'll come here, and I'm just going to merge these two together. All right, so now I look at it and, it looks like one note. And we get this question a lot when people are using maybe a synth workstation, and they put on a big multi-patch and they play a note and they have multiple notes. And, the question is how to get rid of them. So often if there is a function in Cubase where you could choose to delete doubles. So if you go to functions here to delete doubles, but sometimes if it's on the same MIDI channel, it may not if it's on different MIDI channels, that may not work. But if we look at your plugins here, so let's say if I wanted to look at let's go to my MIDI menu to the list editor. So here you could often see like the notes that will be, as the notes are doubled, you can see it pretty clearly in the list editor as there are different MIDI notes that will be doubled. And if you wanted to, you could, do something like, select every other MIDI note, and there's operations for that where you can select every other MIDI note and delete. But if you wanted to determine if your notes are doubled, you could do this. And if you have a controller that's transmitting multiple MIDI channels simultaneously, you could actually see the channel indication here. So you'd probably see 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. And if you go to the filters, you could just say you want to filter by channels. And what that'll do is you could select one of the channels, choose filter by channels, and at that point say, okay, I only want MIDI channel 1 selected, and it'll filter out everything else that isn't 1, and then you could select all and delete. All right, so we see Graham mentioning as the Yamaha MG12XU USB mixer. Says really is a fantastic piece of kit, just like any Yamaha and Steinberg product, the best, arguably, of course. So yeah, Yamaha makes wonderful equipment, and we're proud to be part of the Yamaha family. So it's nice to be in a company that's focused solely, on music. Okay, we have a question. Hello, how do I convert a Cubase mixdown file so I can share it with others like a JPEG? Okay, so if you want it, the common way to share an audio file is probably going to be an MP3. So if you wanted to do that, what you could do is, let's say if I'm here, I want to just take this little melody. I could go to export audio mixdown, and when you see the file type, here you could choose MPEG 1 layer 3, and that would be a smaller file size, and that would allow you to most likely email the file with someone. JPEG is an image file, so it wouldn't be a JPEG file. So the most common, like I wanted to share my file with someone easily, is going to be an MP3. Okay, we have a question from Jordan. When I drag and drop a MIDI beat from 82 onto my 82, I guess, Addictive Drums 2 onto my Addictive Drums 2 instrument, creates two different tracks with the MIDI part automatically. How do I get it just on the instrument track itself? Okay, I see Mundane Sheep corrected himself for to MPEG instead of JPEG. So if when dragging from a MIDI file, from like a MIDI instrument like Addictive Drums into the project window, generally those are just standard MIDI files. And there is a preference to be aware of. So if you go to your Cubase preferences, and it's probably going to create, so we go to MIDI file, and you'll see destination. So you could try to just say instrument tracks or MIDI tracks. And if you choose like Halion Sonic SE, when you drag the file over, it will then instantiate and load a copy of Halion Sonic SE. And this is kind of ideal for if you're sharing like general MIDI files, because Halion Sonic SE will load up with a general MIDI bank and play the MIDI files back for you. But you may want to try like an instrument track or a MIDI track, depending on what type of track your Addictive Drums is on. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Okay. So just see a question, was this video stay online after finishing the live stream? So yeah, it will be available to watch directly after we finish the live stream. So directly after, it usually takes maybe a half hour for it to kind of YouTube to do all of its processing, and then it should be available right after that. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, is there any Steinberg harmonic emphasizer to use for restoring audio? So we probably did one of the very first plugins ever for that called Spectralizer. I don't think we have anything that's so current with that. So in Nuendo, there's one called Post Filter, which will allow you to kind of deal with the overtone series. But let's just take a quick look and see if I'm forgetting anything. You know, a lot of people would use like the frequency EQ. Yeah, I don't think that there's any that are currently coming in. You know, it used to be more, um, they used to be, you know, used a lot more. Sorry, just shut off my alarm. They used to be used more for like when people were transferring more from analog tape. But you know, check out the, you know, frequency plugin as well. All right, just reading through comments here. Okay, he says, when I want to edit my singer's vocals, is there a way in Cubase, like the same but without the usage of Melodyne, to change the keys manually into the right note? So a lot of times it's not necessarily like the key that's, you know, but let's say if I come here and I have like a vocal and piano part that I'm just kind of working with here. So what I could do is I'm going to take this piano part and go to my project menu, and I'll say, let's go to chord track, and I'll say create chord symbols. And this will now come over here and make chord symbols of the piano part. Now, when I double click on my audio editor, I could open it up and we can see our very audio edit. And we could choose to have you know, different color schemes. So here I could have it based on the chord track. So I can see that green notes fall within the chord, blue notes are within the scale, and red notes are out of key. So 90% of what you're going to do in vocal editing is not, you know, so you could see visually, like, you know, if it's in key or out of key. But most of the time, what you're going to do is actually just come over here and just do pitch correction to center. So it's not that someone is, you know, often, you know, we hear the term singing out of key all the time, and it's often not that, you know, someone is in the key of F and they hit a B natural instead of B flat or C. They're just sharp or flat. So, but if I move a note, you know, or a segment here too, this, I can know just visually by seeing its color that whether that's going to work or cause issues. So if we wanted to listen to the vocal and piano and we have a red note, so red in most cultures like a stop sign. So we can say, okay, that's bad. So I could try here, and that would be within the chord as well. Or I could move it down and listen to that and know that works just by the color. So that's how you could kind of, you know, get very easy musical, you know, references based on colors from the chord track itself. So. All right, so we see Maximilian Music just bought Cubase Pro 11 today. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us on the live stream. It says he got it because he doesn't like FL Studio for recording and editing vocals, and he tested trial version of FL. So welcome, and we hope you enjoy your Cubase, and we hope to see you on more future live streams. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. So. Okay. Okay. All right. So we see, can you show us how to use quick controls? Because it doesn't work for me anymore in Cubase 11. All right. So your quick controls, you know, when we go to, let's say, an instrument here. All right. So I'm just going to load up, let's do maybe Pad Shop. All right, so now I have my quick controls and I have my CC121 controller, and I just kind of put it into quick control mode so I could do this. So usually when quick controls stop working, kind of like you describe, what you want to do is to go into the studio, to studio setup, and you'll see quick controls. Make sure that you have these quick controls that have the correct MIDI input and output. So you could just come right over here for your VST quick controls and say, you know, I'm using this MIDI. This is the MIDI port where the quick control information is going in and out of. And it's probably maybe that didn't get translated from a previous version, but just reset the MIDI input and output, and that should probably do the trick for you. That's all you have to do. Okay, so we have a question. I use notation very often, and it's quite annoying to read all the notes with sharps. What should I do to make the notation notes in the E flat key and all the notes with flats instead of sharps? Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll just do a new project here. Or I'll just revert this one and I'll modulate it. Okay, so let's say I'm in the key of G here, and I'm going to just transpose up to A flat. So I'm going to come right here. Okay, so now when I want to look at this in notation, okay, so what I'm going to do is just double click, and I'm going to go to main, and I'm going to just set my key here to A flat and hit apply. So now as the notes are entered in, so let's say as I go to enter an A in here, so let's say if I select the pitch here, we can see, okay, or I'm sorry, I put in a C, but let's come over here. And you could just see that as we enter in the notes, that here, you know, it's going to be, you know, so if I go to A flat, you know, we could see that it will just, you know, comply with the key signature. So make sure that you have the key signature turned on. And there's one other preference, like if you have the chord track set up, like even with other, so say if I just go to, the key here. All right, so now when I go to the key, I'm going to just switch. All right, so I'll just take the lock off the key. So I'll just come here and we'll put in a flat. So you see that that will immediately turn to so I'll uncheck the automatic scales. And let's say we want to set this to let's see if there's a way here to. So it looks like it's still second there, but let's come over here. And one other preference to be aware of, I think it's maybe under editing. Just trying to find this one preference. But there's a little preference for this. Let me see if I can find it quickly. But that will, in the one preference, will allow you to. Okay, is this the N harmonics from chord track? So let me just see if that. So now we can see this as. But yeah, well, it's not working as I expect. But try just to make sure that when you're in the score editor, that you have the key defined in there. And then that should, as we go to select, your different chords. But let me just try that preference one more time. So you see now it changed from D sharp to E flat and now we see the flats. So once again, just go to this preference. Once we have that, so it says N harmonics from chord track. So try that. Sorry, it took a while to get there. Okay. So you see in a previous live stream, you talked about writing in the key of C flat. This is not entirely clear to me. So someone had asked a question about writing in the key of C flat, and I told them it was probably a bad idea, and that it should probably be written in the key of B. Obviously, there could be cases when the key of C, notating a C flat may make sense within a particular chord. But I was trying to, and I think it was someone that didn't understand music theory that was asking about that. So that's why I kind of advised them to maybe consider writing in the key of B. All right, lost my space. So let me just. All right, so I think my son is home. So he may come down. Let me just say hi to my son really quick. All right, I'm back. Sorry for the interruption. Okay. So we have a question. Do you need MIDI out for quick control? So you just need something that's going to transmit MIDI like from the controllers, but you don't need like the track itself or like MIDI being sent out of Cubase to a device. Just MIDI being received from a device into Cubase for quick controls. Okay, so we have a question from Bizad. Hi, when the audio interface is 24-bit, is it advisable to record on 24-bit or 32-bit, 32-bit float? Thanks. So if you have a 24-bit audio interface, and if you're recording with effects, it could make sense to record as 32-bit float. And that's just kind of adding extra information within the word that's been captured to accommodate extra information beyond what's been captured with the initial audio source. 32-bit integer would be really limited to only interfaces that have 32-bit integer conversion, such as like the Steinberg URC or the Steinberg AXR4. So it can make sense to do, if you're just doing straight audio recording, 24-bit is fine. If you find yourself recording with software effects, then 32-bit float can make sense with a 24-bit interface. So question, does Cubase Pro have features that make it easy to record vocals and acoustic guitar? So yeah, I mean, just recording audio, is really just a matter of being able to come over here. You define a folder. If you want to record acoustic guitar and vocals, you could add 2 audio tracks. Come right over here. You can say, okay, vocal. guitar, set the correct input for those, and just hit record, and you could be recording in just a matter of seconds. Okay, so I see a question from Luca. I saw Panorama P4 in your MIDI drop-down list. How's it holding up with the integration in Cubase Pro 11? I don't do much of the advanced integration personally with it. I know it does a lot. I tend to treat it just as a MIDI keyboard. So I have it. I kind of tend to use my CC 121 more, but I know that the Panorama, the Nectar, does wonderful integration with Cubase. All right, so I guess I see from Jeff Zabelski, 160 whacks on the like button. So yeah, we have 163. That's great. So we have a question. Is there a function for detecting chord progressions in guitar parts? So not for audio guitar parts, but for MIDI guitar parts. So it's a kind of common feature request, so maybe we'll see it in the future. And I know that the development team is aware of it. But we also want to make sure that it's actually kind of working as expected. Okay, my chat field jumped on me again. Okay. All right, so I'm back to where I was. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I've finished my tracks and I decided it needs to be faster. How can I make the whole track faster? So, you know, some people would choose to do it after like it's been mixed down and do a time stretch, but, you know, other ways that you could do it would be just if everything was in kind of musical mode. You know, so if you're generally by default, your MIDI tracks would be in musical mode, but I could select all of my audio recordings here and place them into musical mode, and we'll see this little icon appear. Once that's done, and when you record into Cubase, each of the files will be tempo stamped at the tempo they were recorded in. So as we play, I can now just come here, and if I just type in a new tempo, so okay, I want it to be 112, 144, or 88. I could just type in a new tempo and it'll just play back at the tempo that I enter. So you could just simply adjust all your tracks, place them all in musical mode, and you'll be in good shape. Okay, so we have a question. How do you get the event volume adjustment after it gets cut and glued? Once you've done that, you're not presented with the option to adjust the clip gain. Okay, so if I'm here, let's say I take like one of the files here, I'll take the bass part, and I've cut out a couple, let's say I cut some of these events. All right, and let's say I want to just glue these two events together. So now when I glue these, this will take it from an event to a part. So I'll grab my glue gun. So like a lot of times now I come here, let's say I cut this. So what you want to do is to just, you know, and you'll get it to an event that kind of, let's say I do my edit And now I can't really glue these parts because what this is now turned into a part. So what you could do is go to your audio menu and choose to dissolve part. And then you could just come right over here and adjust the gain for both of, so once you do certain types of edits, it turns it into a part. So just select it, audio, dissolve part, and then you could have access to your clip gain. All right, reading through more questions. All right, so another point that some people have brought up, like Jazz Dude, about like recording acoustic guitar and vocal. There are preset templates for this. If you go to new project, go to production. Let's see where there's some, but all right, so you could just come right over here to recording and say acoustic guitar plus vocal. Hit create. You're going to define a folder. And then once you do this, you can now have a whole template set up for acoustic guitar and vocal. So that's another way. So, you will get kind of some preset configurations, with the appropriate effects loaded up. Okay, so we have a question from Mark. Greg, when we audio export, is the interface DAC in use, or is this done in the Cubase engine? So when you're doing an export audio mix down, it's just doing everything for the internal engine. Unless you're using external effects processors that are connected to the A to D, D to A conversion, then that information goes out of the converters and then kind of back into Cubase. So... Okay, so we have another question. So it says how to save a loop that was created in the project into a favorite media bay folder. Thanks again. So basically, any folder that you define in the media bay. So let's say we go to media bay here, and let's say you have, you come over to this computer and you go to, let's say, documents, and you wanted a particular folder to be like your favorite loops. So say projects. And now I want, this folder here. Let's say this, I want it to be, for Media Bay to find it. But then all I have to do is just say, add favorite. And once the favorite has been added, you could save any file into that folder. And, so if I come here, I could export a file. We could say, let's add a favorite. We'll call it jazz. Come over. And now when I go to my favorites, I'll see jazz. So all you have to do is save it into a folder, any file. And if you wanted to even, if we have a drum loop, you could render in place and save that to any folder that you want to. So if I have a quick drum loop here, I could choose to render in place. And then I could just save it directly into that folder, and then that loop would always be in the favorites. All right. So I know we got a little bit of a late start, but I think I had just a couple quick questions before we wrap up here that were mailed in. Thank you for all the wonderful questions. Let me just find the file. Sorry. Okay, we only had a couple questions mailed in this week. Okay. All right, so we have a question. Is there an easier way to use the flex phraser feature without having to go through all the steps deep into Halion? Seems like it could be an excellent standalone plugin with additional style packs available for sale. It is especially useful for making convincing guitar strums from a keyboard, and I think it would be much more widely used if it wasn't so difficult to implement. So currently, the only flex phraser is only a part of Halion Sonic and Halion. And if you're not familiar with it, we'll just take a quick look at it. So let's say I'll just go to Halion Sonic. All right, let me just... All right, so let's say I'll just go to like a nylon. And what this would allow you to do is to come over and just... I'll adjust my tempo down a little bit. So instead of having to play, we can think of this as a really slick arpeggiator. So when we want to go to, some of the different editing functions, you could take a look at, the, the flex phraser. So as we want to look at, the flex phraser, we could have. So I'll just kind of look at the flex phraser here. And as we want to, do this, it could do these different arpeggiators. Now, the reason why it's kind of implemented in the plugin itself is because it's so tightly integrated with the sounds. So, I know there's been some discussions of maybe trying to break that technology out, but I'll make sure to pass it along again. Okay, another question that was mailed in is there a fix for invalid project file messages? I'm using Cubase 11 Pro on a Mac OS Mojave. I have some projects that were done in Cubase 8. Some open and some don't. This happened, I believe, after I migrated a new hard disk and newer Mac Pro. Any help or suggestions would be greatly appreciated. The one thing that could be causing it is maybe a reference to an older plugin. So what you could do, let's say if I wanted to open up like a previous generation of Cubase, I could just come right over here and I could hold down Alt Control plus Shift or Option Command plus Shift. And we could start the program in like a diagnostic mode where we could deactivate all third-party plugins. So I would try to do that and see if you could open up the project. And you may have to reassign some plugins, but that maybe aren't working in the 64-bit environment that was implemented, in later Mac OS versions. but I would give that a try. And often you could load up the project, move the plugin, and then simply resave it, and you could, get the project open. So, all right, we got just a couple minutes left. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learned something. Okay, so we have a question. As with electric guitar processing, is this plugin flexible in terms of overdrive processing and effects? There are only a couple of modest amps in the Cubase elements. So when we start looking at some of the plugins that are available, like in beyond Cubase Elements, one of them would be like the VST amp rack. So if you wanted to take a look at this, and this may be more comprehensive than what you get with the Elements version, but here you could have different amplifiers. So if you wanted to have, like a Vox, a Marshall, Fender, different cabinets that you can mix and match, all sorts of, effect pedals that you could implement, microphone position and placement, signal flow. So, in the upper versions of Cubase, you could get the VST amp rack that will probably cover all of your guitar needs. So another question from Mark Rabin. So just piggyback on that, and it's about our questions of the DAC and if it's using an external, if your converters is used during the mixdown process. Is there a quality improvement by real-time export, etc.? I'm curious if there's low-hanging fruit out there to increase quality. So there's no real, difference whether it's done in real time or faster in real time. So the quality would be the same. Okay, so we see Ian's. We're just going to try out the workspace for opening up his supervision. So I think that'll do the trick. Okay, so let's see how we're doing on time. So I think we're going to maybe wrap up. I know we started a few minutes late because my Bluetooth mouse decided to lose its batteries and not reconnect right before, 1 minute before the live stream started. All right. So with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for, I think we got through the end of the questions. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. And again, if you've learned something, make sure that you hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you do that. And we'll see everyone on Friday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. I wish that everyone is able to stay safe and healthy, and look forward to another wonderful live stream on Friday. Please take care, and we'll see you then. Bye.